When you're working on a game, you will have a million ideas. It's then really important to know which of those are worth pursuing and which ones should be discarded. This is Palworld. Palworld is an open world survival game, similar to something like Ark Survival Evolved, but it has added Pokemon. With this addition, the game becomes fundamentally different and exciting in many ways, but Palworld wasn't satisfied with just adding Pokemon. Instead, they went and followed every single line of thinking they had all the way to its final conclusion. Palworld is the intrusive thought of Pokemon clones, and that's what I would like us to discuss today. But first, let me give you a very brief explanation of how the game works. It's all fairly straightforward. Palworld doesn't innovate too much if it comes to its open world design. You can collect resources by chopping wood or by punching rocks or whatever else you will find in the world, and you can then use those resources to construct things, like for example a primitive workbench right here, which we can then use to build more things, like I could build a wooden club. It's all very simple. The main innovation of the game comes from the pals, which also work just about the way you would expect. You can attack them either yourself or with your buddy pal that you can have active. You can have a party of 5 pals with you and one of them out at any given moment. Then as you fight enemies, as you fight other pals, you can capture them if they drop to low HP. Well, you can also capture them if they aren't low HP, but then it's a bit more difficult. And then they just kind of work like Pokemon. I can go ahead and unsummon this guy, get out a different pal and use that one to fight. You can see they have different levels and they have different abilities. Some of these pals can also be used for the open world exploration. For example, this right here is a bird, so I can fly it, I can ride around on it, and that gives me some verticality to my movement. Once you've captured some pals and gathered some resources, you can get started on building a base. And your base is really the heart and soul of this game. This is where you get to experience your character's progression, and also you get to see all of your pals flopping around happily or depressedly in this particular case. In the base, you have 3 different styles of structures. You have resource structures, like for example right here where stone is being mined. You have pal welfare structures like beds or food or hot springs. And then you also have workbenches and similar structures where you can build yourself new tools for your character. These can include a variety of things and quite interesting ones. So you can see I have an axe, I have a bow, I have a modern style handgun. Yes, this game does just let you go very much modern shooter aesthetic with your character. And honestly, these guns, they are by far the most powerful weapons. You can do a lot of damage with a gun. This probably doesn't come as much of a surprise, but this is much more powerful than using a bow and arrow. But that's pretty much it. In Palworld, you go out into the world, you explore, you gather resources, you gather new pals, you level up your character, and then you come back and you build the new structures that you can now build with the new things that you have gathered, and you get yourself the new upgrades that you can now get with the level ups that you have gotten, and then you go out into the world again and fight more powerful things, and then you just kind of keep that loop going as you become more and more powerful and your base becomes bigger and more complicated. I should mention at this point really quick that this game kind of runs very badly, so excuses for the occasional frame drops. If I could fix it, I would, but I already run the game on very low settings. Anyway, now it is time for us to discuss, why is this game an intrusive thought? Pokemon is a strange series, because it wants you to care about your little pals, about your little Pokemon. They're your buddies. They're your guys. You're supposed to hang out with them and enjoy spending time with them. And they're supposed to become your friends. But then, it doesn't really give you a lot of game mechanics that allow for that. Instead, the only way you can really mechanically contextualize the value of your Pokemon is through combat. All you can do with them is fight. And if a Pokemon isn't good at fighting, then it's probably not worth using. But that goes against that core idea, doesn't it? Because if all you can do is fight, well, then soon enough you're gonna feel like you're really making your life harder than it needs to be by using your favorite. And over the years, I think that's something that's become very clear in the Pokemon franchise. And they have been taking steps against that. They've been taking steps to try and fix that. But Palworld has really taken it one step further. Palworld's base addresses this issue significantly by giving your pals something to do that isn't combat. You can see here, this base is alive, full of my little buddies that I've caught, and they're running around and doing things. Now, this is where genuinely the fact that there are so many makes a huge difference. Because now optimizing isn't as important anymore. Who cares if this little elephant is the most optimal watering elephant? Because look at how many guys there are, and look at how many things they are doing. At the end of the day, I can have some flexibility as the player, because I don't need to worry about having the perfect 6 Pokemon in my party and that's all I've got. No, I have like 20 dudes hanging out in my base and I can pick the ones that I like. Now, that isn't entirely true, because of course we've already talked about different pals having different abilities, but even that can sometimes be beneficial. For example, Rush War can only do mining, it can't do anything else. But that means I know it's gonna do mining, so I might want to use it anyway if I want to prioritize mining. While some of these more complex pals, some of these higher level ones, they often have the ability to do multiple tasks. So they tend to run around a little bit more. You can assign them to specific tasks, but from my experience, that works with limited success. So I have found myself using pals like Rush War just because it lets me focus on one thing. And that's nice. But I like seeing them like this. Isn't that fantastic? It feels so alive. Now, there is a small problem, which you can see in the top right corner, and that is that they're all horribly depressed, apparently. But that is more of a mechanical, mathematical issue, I believe. Like, this is probably something that they can just fix by turning some knobs, and they probably should. But yeah, I do have to say, I've yet to see a base where not every pal was horribly depressed. Maybe they need to be built in a very specific way, but something about it just doesn't quite work. The most interesting thing about Palworld to me is how they took every single idea that they had while making this game and then pushed it as far as they possibly could, always carrying it to its final, most ridiculous conclusion. What do I mean with that? Well, in Palworld, we are capturing pals, and these are our little buddies. And we use the pals to build a base. And in the base, the pals work to help us advance, which means help us build new things, like for example, new equipment, including weapons. And since the weapons are kind of modern style weapons, well, wouldn't it make sense if the pals also got to use them? Since they are building them, and it turns out, well, the developers thought so. Why wouldn't the pals be able to use an assault rifle? And so you can give the monkey an assault rifle. This is a little strange, I have to say. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, but it is quite thought-provoking. Did the monkey need an assault rifle? Does this necessarily add something to the game? And I think so, actually. Yes, it is kind of funny that the monkey is attacking with an actual weapon and not just with vague magic like it normally works in the Pokemon games. And I mean, I am using the same kind of weapon as well, and it's pretty effective. So why wouldn't my monkey, who can clearly use his limbs effectively, why wouldn't the monkey also be able to use a gun? I mean, a gun is a good weapon, as you can see. But that's the thing about Palworld, right? This game never stops to ask, why shouldn't we do this? And instead, it only asks, how far can we push this? How far can we interpret Pokemon into our bizarre ideas? Palworld is all about being edgy. I'm sure this is something you've caught onto by now, and this is also true regarding its treatment of human characters. So you just saw me fight some humans, and you see there's another human here. This is not an ally. This is not a friendly unit. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but in reality, what this is is a human that I have captured. So if you come in here, you can see that down here I have selected this guy. I can unselect him and now he's gone. If I go ahead and put him back into the base, here we go, he's working for me again. I have gone and captured a human, and now this human is working for me in my base, probably against their own will. This is a strange thing to have in this game. Slavery. This is blatant slavery. Now, I do believe that there's a difference between this human entrapment and the pals working for you, because the pals is just some weird plant dinosaurs, a llama wearing sexy boots, or a very fat cow. As much as, of course, these guys are working on my base, this feels more whimsical. This feels more like good fun. Everybody is enjoying themselves. Well, except for all of the pals that are horribly depressed, but that's a different issue. The human that we have captured, though, well, the human, of course, is a human, presumably with a bit more mental capacity than the pals, presumably with their own free will. And that is slavery. That's what it is. Now, I'm not saying that slavery can't be in a game. Slavery is very much something that can be addressed by video games, just like anything could be addressed by video games, because video games are art, and art is free to do whatever it wants to do. But slavery is a touchy subject matter, and it should be handled with some care, with some finesse. And that is something that we don't find in Palworld. Instead, this feels like something they added in because they thought it would be edgy, and because they thought, well, why not? Isn't this funny? And I have to say, I don't really think so. Palworld does make some efforts to try and push you away from capturing humans. So you can see right here it says humans are not pals, therefore they do not possess partner skills, and their work suitability is very low. I think they did this in a way to kind of discourage players from capturing humans, and instead to say, hell, you can, but you shouldn't. They are not very good. From a mechanical perspective, that does work. But from a logic perspective, I actually think that almost makes things worse, because in a way that implies that the humans that we capture are lesser beings. They are worse than everything else in this world. And in a way that is an argument that was used to justify real-world slavery. It falls into that same trap. And there isn't really a good way around this. If they had made the humans be better at working the bases than the pals, then obviously everybody would be capturing humans non-stop, because the players will optimize the game. If they had made them the same, then there would be quite a bit of human slavery in everybody's base, just sort of by coincidence. And of course, if they make them worse, then all of a sudden we now have, well, humans in the game that are lesser beings. And that also feels kind of awkward. You could make the argument that the humans just don't want to work, and that's why they don't do it, but the game doesn't tell us that. That would be an implication that we have to come up with ourselves. The only things that we really have to work with, the only real statements from the game that we have, are the stats it provides. And according to the stats, they are just kind of bad. They're not unwilling. They're just not good at it. And that's a bit over the line, I have to say. As I said, slavery is a touchy subject matter, and I don't believe that Palworld couldn't address it, but I do feel that if they wanted to address it, they should have actually addressed it and not just randomly added it into the game. This isn't them talking about slavery. This isn't them making a statement about slavery. This is them just kind of saying, hey, wouldn't it be funny if you could do this? And I don't really know if that works for me. But Palworld's intrusive thoughts don't end there. You can see right here, this is the next step of construction. You eventually move away from workbenches and you start building assembly lines. And they look like this. And I don't know how else to describe them other than horrible. I mean, look at this. They very deliberately designed these in a way to invoke the idea of sweatshops. And in fact, that's how a lot of the community has taken them. If you go online, you can find lots and lots of videos and images of people building bases that, well, they look abusive. They deliberately are made to resemble horrible, horrible working conditions that we have in the real world. And Yeah, of course. We are just dealing with pals here for the most part. I mean, we just talked about the slavery, but let's set that aside for a moment. So we're dealing with pals here, and, they can do their own thing, and that is fine. But this right here, as far as I'm concerned, it takes away from the whimsy so badly. It takes away from this idea of these being our buddies and our friends, and it turns it into this exploitative experience. It turns it into this matter of, oh, I am no longer just looking to hang out with my friends and build myself a life. And instead it turns into a game about, exploitation and abuse. But that's not even the worst of it. As you go through the game, you will eventually reach a point in your progression where the early game pals aren't really keeping up anymore. And also you have a box full of them as you've gathered a bunch of them across your journey. So what do? Well, you can do this. You can go to this pal condenser, and then you can take your pal and enhance them. And to enhance them, what we do is we pick the one that we want to power up, and then we select a bunch of other similar pals, other pals in the same species. But pay attention to the language that's being used here. Pals used as essences will be consumed. Pals to use as essences. Pal extract. Extract 4. So what we're doing is we're extracting essence from those 4 pals and using them to power up our T-Fant. Once we begin the condensation, it will ask us again, if we do this, then the 4 that we are using as essences will vanish. Are you sure? Yes. And then condensation complete, the pal has become stronger thanks to the noble sacrifices of its companions. So at this point, it's fairly clear we have killed those 4 pals to make this one more powerful. Ooh, well, the whimsy's out the door now, isn't it? But it gets much worse. You have this pal menu here. So what I can do here is I can pet our Gummoos. Gummoss? I guess Gummoss is what it would be. And you can see you can interact with them. However, there's an item that you can build. It's called the Butcher's Knife. And if you use the Butcher's Knife, well, you can see pet becomes butcher. And if you use this, you get this. And that way you butcher the pal and you turn it into food. We could do that again. I'm not entirely sure if we really want to. But this is clearly, very explicitly designed to be visually disturbing. And this is where the whimsy has fully died for me. I think Palworld had such a great opportunity here if they were just willing to embrace, well, the comforting nature of these styles of games. And instead, they just pushed everything further. Why is this in the game? Well, because of the violence that is already part of it in general. That's why we have guns and bows. That's why we can kill humans. That's why we can capture humans. This is a game that embraces its violence and wants you to enact that violence, not just on the world, but also on your partners, on your pals. And it feeds from that. It finds joy in that. And to me, that's where you lose me, if I'm completely honest. I think Palworld had a lot of potential, but these kinds of elements just make it a bit unpleasant for me to play. I firmly believe that the reason why you can butcher pals in Palworld is the same reason why you can capture humans in it. And that's because the creators were just pushing their ideas to the natural conclusion. If I get meat from killing pals out in the world and I can use that meat to feed myself, then wouldn't it make sense if I could kill my captured pals as well and then eat that meat? And yeah, it does make sense, but you gotta think about the damage it does to the atmosphere, to the tone of the game. To be honest, that is something that I don't think the creators cared very much about. They wanted the cutesy aesthetic of Pokemon, but they also wanted a really dark, almost satirical tone to its gameplay. And I think that's because they were paying close attention to online discussion threads about Pokemon and they just decided to implement everything that was in there because wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't it be wild? Wouldn't it get people's attention? And I guess it did. Palworld has been extremely successful, but for me personally, it's a game that I don't find much joy in, and it's not a game that I will continue to play. It's a game that I, however, do think is worth learning from. It did a couple of things that worked really, really well. For example, it combined so many core mechanics, standard mechanics from different games, and then what it did with them is just kind of go a step further, just kind of combine those core aspects and say, hey, what if we push this a little bit more? And that did work for some elements. Running around the world with your monkey with the machine gun is funny, but at the same time, I kind of draw the line once you start enslaving humans. And honestly, it gets much worse. Like if you go and look up online and see what people have done to the humans in the game, see what tutorials were made. To be honest, it's actually bizarre what's out there. The best way to get ammunition is to actually enslave a human. That's the best way to do it, because then you don't have to always run to their shop. You can just capture them and put them into your base. These mechanics maybe could have been controlled a little bit better and could maybe have been dealt with in a more deft way. Overall, I think Palworld is a lesson in control. Sometimes it's fine to let go of it, because that can result in really interesting gameplay moments. Other times, maybe you have ruined your tone by not handling what you are actually implementing with care. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys took something from it. The goal of this is to learn. The goal of this is to look at games and discover what we can take away from them, and maybe things that we can implement in our own designs in the future. So, if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.